Okay, I think let's get going if everyone's ready. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Take Action in Your Curriculum, Optimizing Use of Your EdTech. I'm Haley Diaz, your host for today's event. So before the presentation, let's just knock out a few logistics. One, today's presentation is going to be recorded and it will be distributed to all attendees within the next 24 hours. Two, there are a couple of Zoom features we'll be using today and would love your participation in them. The Q&A feature is for any questions that you might have for our presenter, Dan, today. I will see those and share them with him during the Q&A part of the presentation, which will be at the end. And if we don't get to your individual question, Dan will make sure to follow up with you after the session. And the chat will be used for just general inquiries. Feel free to post anything in there that you would like to share with the whole group. And finally, we'd love to get social with today's event. We'll be tweeting today using the hashtag that's on the bottom of your screen, hashtag Lunch with Leo. So to follow along and participate, just search for the hashtag in your search bar of Twitter and then click on latest. We believe we learn best as a community, so we're always happy to hear your thoughts. And so with that taken care of, let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Dan Thompson. Always an educator, Dan transitioned from teaching high school to focusing on instructional design and educational technology in higher education for the last decade. Throughout his career, he has assisted faculty in course design and development while also introducing new methods of utilizing educational technology in the curriculum to create a learner-centered environment. His background includes leading faculty development efforts at Oklahoma State University, Center for Health Sciences, and Kent State University College of Podiatric Medicine. He holds a Master of Science in Technology Enhanced Learning and a Bachelor of Science in Adolescent and Young Adult Education from the University of Dayton. And with that, happy to turn things over to Dan.
Well, thanks, Haley. I appreciate the introduction, as always. I also appreciate that you stumbled over a word or two because I'm going to do that a bunch today. So thanks for setting the tone that it's okay to do that. As you may have seen, because I accidentally skipped ahead as Haley was talking, I do have one more logistical item to knock out before we get to the content today, and that is I might have a couple co-presenters, as many of you I'm sure are doing the same. I'm working from home right now, and my wife and I have a couple guys that may like to come and visit, especially when they hear that the microphone is on and the camera's on. So they like to sing and say hello to the camera. So you may see Dexter or Fitz today. If you hear a cat yowling in the background, they're fine. And if you see one fly across the camera, I promise I'm safe as well. So with that knocked out, and let's get to today's objectives. So really just want to knock out 4 key objectives today, and I really just have one content slide for each one because since we're really trying to focus in about 30 minutes today, I'll only speak for about 20-25 and give some time for questions at the end. And these are pretty simple. We will talk about how to evaluate use of EdTech. So today's talk is a lot about EdTech as a troubleshooter and how to optimize EdTech in your curriculum. We'll also mention how to use those EdTech tools as problem solvers. This is kind of a theme throughout. They'll keep popping up. In healthcare education, a lot of times we've seen across programs to have the same issues, general issues, and a lot of times that's time. Everyone, we're busy, especially faculty and clinical faculty. Therefore, efficiency is key. Budget's always an item that's on everyone's mind, so I'll touch on that briefly, and then communication, whether that's faculty to faculty, faculty to student, student to faculty. All throughout the curriculum, there's different modalities of communication we need to hit, and I'll address that as well. And which I kind of jumped to number 4 there, and then number 3, we'll talk about cognitive load. Obviously, we ask a lot of our faculty, staff, and students in healthcare education, and during the pandemic and how items are changing right now, there's most certainly extra stress on faculty, staff, students. So we'll talk about how to reduce that cognitive load through use of EdTech. So first and foremost, I want to talk about evaluating your EdTech. And as Haley read in my bio, I worked at a couple of different healthcare education programs, and I was fortunate enough that it was my role to work with the EdTech. And I had to answer these questions a lot that I have on the top of the screen. Is it used effectively, or is it even used, or how do you evaluate your EdTech? Over the course of so many years, oftentimes EdTech has been evaluated by really course evaluations from students or observational data from faculty in the classroom. Did they feel like students were engaged? Did it work for them? Whether that was user error or the program itself, how just, was it adding to student learning? And that's really tough to quantify when we're using qualitative feedback, again, like observational data and student comments. So one area that is a great way to use your ed tech to problem solve and is with how you evaluate other methods of ed tech in your program. So you can actually you're able to map your ed tech in Leo, and I have a bar to the right here, this little screenshot. For those of you that are not current users of Leo's platform, this is a little bit of a look of what you can map within each event or class session. And so, there's a number of items there, but I wanted to obviously show that, but I also want to really focus here on resources and themes. And so when you think about the resources that you use in your course, and ed tech can be one of those, and themes are really something that is more customizable to allow you to map specific things within your curriculum that you want to track and quantify. And EdTech can certainly be one of those. So with each class session, you can just mark how you taught it. So right now, I'm sure if you were doing that for your class sessions, a lot of you would probably be marking Zoom or some other sort of video or lecture capture type tool. And then there's other ways that you're integrating students and giving them whether it's formative assessment during class or different presentation tools, which there's a number of those that are readily available. But you can identify how many of those are being used by course, how many of those are being used by class session, and even hours. So sometimes it can be a little misleading that something is used, a piece of ed tech is used 15 times, let's say, in a course. However, that might be just little bits here and there. Maybe a half of a course or a half of a class session is using a specific tool. This will allow you to break down by hours, so you can really have an idea of the impact that ed tech is having in your curriculum, and not just by the use either, but also you can, when you're mapping all these items that I have to the right here, again, gosh, we can just start toward the top, your objectives and your assessment methods, things of those nature. You're able to have a really great look at, are students performing, how are students performing on that type of content, those types of objectives that you have in your curriculum mapping. And then you can also see how it's been taught as well. Therefore, you have a really great view of not only are we using the ed tech, but are students performing well when we teach with that ed tech. And again, this works for face-to-face or distance learning as well. And one of the ramifications this can have actually is on your budget. Another one of those pain points I mentioned at the top today. So when you map your ed tech tools, it really creates a resource audit. So you can very quickly see what tools that are being used. I know that as someone who's fortunate enough to get to read student course evaluations throughout my career and have to make decisions off of those, it can be a little bit misleading at times. If there's a student that makes a really great comment and explains something really well on why they might not like an ed tech tool that was used in class, it's very easy to generalize that and say students hate this program or it doesn't work for students. But again, that might just be one or two comments out of, some of us have, 100 plus students in their class. So that's really a small percentage that may or may not like that tool. So this resource audit truly lets you know where, when and where it's being used throughout your curriculum. It also gives you a chance to know which faculty members are using it. So you can ask them directly if, how their interactions with that type of tool, and if it's, how students are engaging, and then what works for them. That it can be a really great driver for faculty development in your program. If you have a faculty member that's really shining with an ed tech tool, you can take them as an example and share that with other faculty throughout your program to really make sure that you're engaging students appropriately. But this resource audit also is a data-driven decision-making tool because it allows you to see if a program isn't being used. I've had this before as the ed tech guy in a med school where I've had the tools that I've really liked and believed in and showed our faculty, and they would come to the faculty development events and we teach with and I believe we were teaching with them, and sometimes I was wrong and I didn't realize that there were certain items that weren't being used or being used as well as they could have, or being used in a way that we couldn't find a free tool to replace it. And so this data-driven decision making allows you to look at that audit and say, okay, program X is only being used 3 times this year. This might be a budget item we can move off of. And so it does allow you to not just always have to wait for the student evals and have that one passionate student who likes or dislikes a program. Let that drive how you make your decisions. It also it gives you justification for using ed tech tools. If you see across the board that faculty are using certain tools, you're seeing that students, when you look at your mapping, that students are successfully achieving the student learning outcomes associated with when you're teaching with those specific tools. If there's a match there, that lets you know that students are performing well when you're teaching with those tools. That can be a positive to continue that. And of course, at the bottom, it can also be a support to make a change there as well. And again, I'm going to flip back. That can all be easily done really in every single class session. I'll show a couple more screenshots later, and it really should be this easy. I'll touch on this a little bit more with cognitive load, but when you're in a program or in your LMS or curriculum mapping platform, it really should be that easy to bring all of these items together so that when you're adding your content, when you're adding a discussion post, when you're adding a description for your course, you should be able to map these items just as simply so that you can have that resource audit, and then also just for yourself to know what's working and what isn't. Okay, moving along. So saving time and cognitive load and reducing cognitive load are really, really big items. I have at the top here, and obviously I'm trying to make a point because I broke out the italics here, but this is always an issue. I don't think I've ever worked in a healthcare education program where I've asked faculty and staff if they have a ton of extra time just to do some projects, and they raised their hand and said, well, yeah, Dan, of course I do. Please throw some projects my way. Everyone's really busy. Whether it's course load, working as a academic advisor for students, being clinical faculty that work in a clinic, as well as being teaching faculty, research projects. I mean, all of you know what your workload is. I don't need to tell you what that is. But so it's always an issue. This isn't just a COVID thing. So how do we help all involved in the curriculum? Well, so I'm going to break this down by each of the stakeholders, and obviously I felt it important enough to break down a whole one for students here. And we're going to make all relevant information for students available in one location. So I have for years done the student orientation, and if you have been involved in student orientation, and I think if you're involved in almost any part of not just the curriculum, but somewhere in the school, you've probably had something to do with student orientation. You know that students are talked at a lot. And I used to do the EdTech time. And I'm sorry if you did the EdTech time, you didn't get this much time, but I think I got about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours to introduce students to our EdTech. And we would do, sometimes 5, 6 different types of EdTech programs. And that's really overwhelming for students. And these are the students that were face-to-face, that we could stand over their shoulders and tell them where to download, where to point, click, log in, bookmark things, all that. We could do that with them, and that's not necessarily a possibility right now. And so being able to reduce that cognitive load for students and filter them through one EdTech platform to log into, so they don't have to worry about these different logins, is really huge for them. And so they should be able to access all the things I have on the screen, and there's many, many more. Yeah, I have et cetera somewhere in there. But they need to be able to see, their calendar, where they should be, when they should be. I'll show another specific screenshot of that, of what that really could and should look like. Their content, obviously, and for med students, they need to be able to get their content when they need it. And that's not just at class time, it's also in study time. Grades, evaluations, whether that's completing course evaluations or being evaluated by didactic or clinical faculty, they need to be able to get that in one location. And then, standard things that we do now all the time: messaging, discussion boards, messaging being like emails about the class, and then discussion boards, which I'm sure many of you use if you're teaching in more of a virtual environment right now. And it doesn't stop, and it's, when we talk about, I mentioned before, there's a lot of different ed tech tools you can use to teach. And I know that you might not just have one platform that does calendar, content, grades, and I'm not saying I ever have just used one either. Goodness, I've used dozens. But With the content, one focus I would really look toward is being able to embed that content into where students are accessing these other items here. And so, if whether it's a Nearpod or a Pear Deck or something where students are accessing content in either a synchronous or asynchronous modality, you can again embed that with a simple embed code. We actually have an article on our site that we can send out after the fact to get to folks about the different ways to embed. So again, you can still use those different types of programs that you like to use in EdTech, but streamline that use so students are only logging into one place. It seems like a little thing, but it's a real big deal, especially for you troubleshooting. Not all students remember their passwords all the time for every EdTech, and they can't just knock on your door and walk into your office like they used to just last year. So this here is a basic look of, I mentioned previously here, calendar and content. Those two things are really key. So here's a basic look in how we do that in Leo. So we have, when students log in, this is essentially what their home screen looks like. They have their calendar where they need to be for the week. These are, the different events that they have for this week. I guess I picked one in March. And then to the right here, we actually have all the content that is featured in these different events that you see on the screen during the week. So if a student needs to quickly download all the content that they need for the week in advance, they have it right there ready to go. Or download it, access it however you want. You can see we have web links and Word docs and PDFs and different PowerPoints. So any way that they would choose to access that, they can see it in one quick way. So again, we're reducing that cognitive load by increasing time and efficiency on the student end. Then faculty, you see this view as well. This is a view of a session or event. And so we can see here, I mentioned before about having all information in one location. Students have all the materials that they need. I'm pointing at my screen. Hopefully you're looking at it with me, but they have it right here on the right. And then all necessary information, a description. And obviously this is a static screenshot, so I can't click over, but the mapping is available for students as well. So they can see the objectives for each class session. So they're in the know with everything. And we'll kind of talk about at the end as we wrap it up, the value adds of that. Well, I mentioned before, we have multiple stakeholders in the curriculum, and it's not just saving time and reducing cognitive load for students, which is key, but we have other folks, and some of these might be your roles that are joining us today. So how do we help all involved in the curriculum? Well, there's didactic faculty, and they can benefit from the curriculum mapping two ways. One, when the curriculum mapping is done in the same space where they're adding their content and really working within what was essentially an LMS in this sense, they can easily do the mapping right there. It's an all-in-one space to get that done. And so it's something that they can be cognizant of, and it's not an after the fact, oh no, I need to get this done because our self-study is being done next month, but something that they're consistently doing as they're putting their course together. But then also, you as a faculty member can see what students are being taught before you walk into the classroom, and also can peek at what they need to know in future courses. So not only the content that you should be teaching, but also the level at which students, their prior knowledge, and then again what they'll need to know. And so that's a big value add for faculty. Since I have a couple minutes and I know I have a couple slides left, I'll tell a quick story on this. I once was working with a faculty member. I was in a classroom, and it was a team talk course which we have a lot in healthcare education. And faculty member walked in and started to teach. And as they got to slide 2 or 3 past their objectives, the students started to let them know that this was already taught. And they said, oh, no, this is a unique concept. And actually it was taught the hour before they had walked in the room by the previous faculty member, because we didn't have this type of mapping in place yet. And so they were totally none the wiser that this is already taught, and the students were then tuned out. And of course, the faculty member was none too pleased that they spent all this time preparing something that really wasn't needed. So this is a way, again, going back to time and efficiency, which we'll talk about in a slide or two, on how to be more efficient in this process as well. It's also a way to reduce ed tech programs. I know as someone who's trained faculty for years, and those of you that are faculty joining us today, you probably know this. It's not real exciting when you're introducing yet another ed tech program to faculty because again, they have a lot on their plate, and some of these, the time to take to learn to how to use a new program and use it appropriately can be a little painful at times, especially when we have folks, not in the building right now. We're doing different types of virtual trainings. So having all these items, the mapping, the content, the calendar, the discussion, all those things in one location for faculty really makes it something that can streamline their work. Just like we're reducing cognitive load for students logging into one place, we can do the same for faculty. And then with clinical faculty, the one area in which I've dealt with clinical faculty is that they're completing evaluations of their students in the clinic. And so we have, physicians that are going through and having to evaluate a number of students. And back in the day, we used to actually use something called paper and pencil, which is a novel idea these days to do that, and it could be difficult to track, or rely on email. But when you have your evaluations in a same system as you have all these other items, clinical faculty can complete those evals, and it will be available for students and for your course directors and coordinators just without needing email or any other communication because it's in one location as everything else. One great thing that I've used with Leo specifically is that the clinical, and I think I just saw the chat jump, so I think Haley may have posted an article in there about that. So thank you, Haley. Is that the clinical faculty can actually get these evals emailed to them, and they're authenticated through their email, so they don't have to worry about logging in. So again, reducing that cognitive load. They don't have to learn a new ed tech program. You don't have to worry about training clinical faculties all throughout your state. They can get an email triggered to them based on the students they have to evaluate. They can complete it right there. They don't have extra access to the system. There's all the securities in place, which we won't get into now because that's not the time for it, but they can complete that and move on rather easily. And then finally, academic advisors, you should be able to have quick, secure access to advise these information. And we're not talking via email. We're not talking about logging into grade books and going through different courses and sifting through. Again, that might not always be FERPA compliant either, but being able to just see the students assigned to you as an academic advisor, what their information is, and Leo provides that as well. And I'll show you a quick screenshot here in a second. So talking about mapping, this is actually the same event I showed about 4 slides ago. I just scrolled down here and we have the video embedded in the left. And I talked about embedding things. This is an example of being able to embed things for students so that you don't have to tell them to go to YouTube, Vimeo, or some other ed tech product. But then when the faculty had the mapping right here, again, this is the same area where we see materials, where they post their course materials, PowerPoints, PDFs. They do the mapping there as well. And then again, if you are the faculty that are teaching the course after this, you can view but not edit this type of mapping, and you can see that what your students' prior knowledge should be coming into your course, and what to teach, and just as importantly what not to be redundant on, and really either wasting your time and students' times, or boring them. If students have redundant information, you're probably going to lose their attention pretty quickly. And with all the distractions out there, like their computers and cell phones and all those good things, and now that we're all at home, maybe 2 cats that might be joining us sooner than later, then they might get distracted from the work that they should be doing. I mentioned I'm going to jump back for academic advisors, the quick, secure access. Within Leo, we do have an area where each student has their own portrait. This is actually the student view of the portrait, but it looks just the same for you advisors out there and faculty. So very quickly, you can access what students need. Again, or what their students' scores and what they may need as far as advising, where they could be struggling. And I'm not going to go through the tabs up there, but you can see that there's a plethora of information about students. Again, time, efficiency, budget, communication. This especially hits on communication because there's no need for the folks who run the assessment scores, or the folks who do the grade book, to then email out or reach out to people. they can log in themselves and view information on their advisees. So we're never hung up on waiting for that email that we are so accustomed to. All these items are available in one centralized platform that they can do. And so that's a great way to be able to use your EdTech to troubleshoot those big items. And in closing, and we should have a couple minutes for questions after this. So it's all about improving our communication efficiency, and when we can do those two things, we can save time, and we can really, and all of these items that I mentioned, time, efficiency, communication, budget. Whenever we think about those things, they're all tied to student outcomes, and how can we balance those things to make sure we're positively contributing to influence positive student outcomes and improving student outcomes. And one area is the mapping, doing the communicating for you. And I mentioned this before, but just to kind of conclude, with faculty and staff, it lets you know what to teach and students' prior knowledge. And so always make sure that you're able to map your content as you're putting it together, mapping your learning objectives to your program goals, mapping your resources, those types of things, because it really does inform not just a resource audit for EdTech, which can hit that budget line, but it really informs everything else that's going on in curriculum. It communicates to students, it communicates to fellow faculty and staff. And then for students, it lets you know what's required for class. And I apologize, I keep jumping around, but I just want to show the top left here. It lets you know, students should always be in the know of what's required for class. And with Leo, it's in the calendar and it's on that main view. But then when they go into each course, they know if there's a dress code, if it's mandatory attendance or not, what they need to watch before. Clicking back ahead here, what pre-work they need to do. All of those items that really create transparency and accountability, so we can eliminate students showing up to class not prepared because they didn't know, they didn't read the email, or whatever it may be. But it's right there available for them immediately. Again, that it's a little piece of communication, but helping students always be prepared for class allows your class, especially now when you're in a virtual environment, and maybe really lean on like Zoom breakout rooms to have students working together. You really need those students to be prepared for the class. And it can be difficult to do when you don't have them in person. And so this is a way to be able to really increase that accountability. So again, going back over all the items here with the learning objectives for today, we have our use of EdTech in the program and evaluating it. And it's as easy as mapping those resources and themes to make sure that you're identifying what you're using, when you're using, how you're using, and is it working for you. Using your EdTech tools as problem solvers, again, that's kind of theme today, but always focus on what you can do to reduce that cognitive load and improve communication. A lot of times that's through using a centralized system and having everyone filter through that and embed into there. And then finally, I mentioned the communication is key, whether it's a calendar for everyone to see what they need, or to easily get information out to students, again, without extra emails or sending them extra videos, but embedding to one location is a big help for them. So with that, I know we have a minute or two left on time, so I'd love to kick it back over to Haley to see if we have any questions, and I appreciate everyone's time today.
Thank you so much, Dan, for your great presentation. Super engaging, really informative. Great job. So now, we'll just take some couple questions in a little Q&A session.
Okay.
And as a reminder, just throw your questions into the chat. But we had a great question come in to start us off first. And that was, once you understand which pieces of tech are or aren't being used, what recommendations do you have on figuring out whether the tech is not the right fit or whether faculty and staff just need additional training or support?
Oh, that's a tremendous question. Yeah, you're right, Haley. So oftentimes, if you are, let's say you see something, I'm going to pick out the point that say it's not being used much. I would evaluate that tech personally as if your role is in EdTech, to see if it's still applicable, because sometimes it's no longer applicable to your type of curriculum or your students. And if you're in that role and you do deem that it could be used appropriately, I would ask the faculty members that are using it, why they're using it and how they're using it. And then if you can't get a survey out to faculty, I would just do a sample of some faculty that maybe tend to be your better EdTech users and ask them why they aren't using it, or if they're aware that you have it. Because sometimes it's a matter they're or they're not even aware that you have it, especially if they're newer faculty. So at that point, if they're totally unaware, then that might be the point to do some faculty developments or internal advertising of it and see if you can increase use then. And if they are aware and aren't using it for a reason, then take that information to help you make a decision. But there are a lot of times I've run into the fact that they always aren't aware that we have a program that can do something, or in the case of many programs, and this includes Leo, where they have this great platform at their disposal, but they might not understand it can do what they actually want it to do. So I think that getting their feedback really will help drive where you want to go next with that. Thanks, Haley.
Thank you. Great question, Joel. And another great one, if we have time for just one more,
Sure.
says, I have a tough time getting my faculty to engage with tasks like mapping because they're already so busy. Do you have any tips on how to increase faculty contributions to the mapping process without overwhelming their already busy schedule?
Oh, that's a good one, and I'm fortunate enough that I've had to live that firsthand. And so part of it is training, like we talked about in the prior question, where it's not faculty are busy, and adding a new something new to their plate can be a big ask. And that's why one of the things I mentioned today actually is being able to have that mapping feature available in the everyday product that you use can help reduce that cognitive load. And sometimes it's just training. I mean, if they're in Leo, for example, and adding materials, and it's a pretty easy process, just to it's just like uploading something to an email or any other program you'd use. Sometimes they're unaware that they can jump over the mapping tab and complete a mapping. And so sometimes it's as easy as just having a training session, sending an email. I know that with Leo specifically, we have plenty of great resources that you can share with your faculty that can show them these types of items and how simply they can do it. And at the end of the day, it's really about having some sort of tangible benefit for them. So when they can see if there's a benefit for something, this is just human nature. If there's a benefit to something, we'll do it. And if there's a benefit for faculty that they can complete their mapping then and don't have to do the rush before accreditation time, that's a great benefit. But also they're being able to build their team talk course as a group unit together, and their mapping contributing to that process helps their peers, and then their peers mapping also helps them. That's something I've seen real time when we get our faculty together or get them the little Zoom blocks on our screen, explaining that to them and how everyone mapping, as they're putting their course together, benefits everyone else in the course real time. That's really a big help. So I think driving home that point and then backing it up with just a little bit of training will help get you there. Thank you. That was a good one. I think we're kind of a little over time now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're right at the end, so we'll conclude the question and answer. And if you have any further questions or think of any later, just feel free to email us individually. And we just really want to, again, thank everyone for today's attendance for today's webinar. We hope the information that was presented has been super helpful and engaging, and we'll make sure to share today's recording with you in an email and follow up with anyone if they have any more questions. So thanks again for everyone's participation and attendance. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, y'all. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.